So let's start with the basics. What is mindfulness? You've probably heard this term. It is certainly a very popular buzzword in society right now. And I think in psychology certainly has been a very popular thing to study and to apply when it comes to mental health. And I like to use this image as kind of a starting point for talking about mindfulness because I think it's pretty simple. It's certainly not going to be the most nuanced interpretation, but it does effectively, I think, communicate what we're looking for when we're starting to think about mindfulness practice or the use of mindfulness in our lives. So of course, you see in the image a person and a dog walking along with their own thought bubbles. And we see that the human is completely overrun. That thought bubble looks very relatable to me right now. Just so many things to keep track of, lots of things on their mind, and all of that stuff, not necessarily anywhere in their field of vision, not anywhere in their current moment or reality. Whereas the dog's thought bubble, and again, I know that a dog is very different than a human, very different cognitive experiences. The dog is tuned into what is directly in front of them right there. They can see the sun, they can see the trees, and we have the caption of mindful or mindful. And I think essentially that this is what mindfulness is this being present. Seeing what is exactly in front of you, interpreting what is exactly in front of you, or feeling, emotionally, physically, what is happening in any given moment. So I'll give you my definition in words here. That mindfulness is present awareness, whatever's happening in this moment. It's directing attention to this moment in time, very intentionally and without judgment. And when I say without judgment, I don't mean that means no thoughts of judgment in your head. I mean that means no judging what the experience is in this moment, or trying not to push away what's happening in this moment, or becoming overly enmeshed in what's happening in this moment. So I'll say that again, present awareness, directing attention to this moment in time, on purpose, intentionally, without judgment. And I have another quote here that I like to use as a definition, just to kind of ease different directions around the awareness of what mindfulness might mean or how it might feel for you. So mindfulness is the aware, balanced acceptance of the present experience. Really isn't more complicated than that. It's opening to or receiving the present moment, pleasant or unpleasant, just as it is, without either clinging to it or rejecting it. So this sounds pretty simple, but also maybe pretty hard if you're anything like me. You probably are sitting there thinking, okay, but there's a lot going on in any given present moment, and I'd really like to calm down. And sometimes things aren't necessarily easy to sit with. It's nice when things are nice, but it's hard when things are hard. That is true. That is true. And so what we will try to help you do as a part of this workshop series is find different ways of building a sense of tolerance and connection to the present moment, and finding anchors that can be sort of the thing that brings you back to the present moment, even when your brain and other lived experience is taking you elsewhere, taking you to the past or to the future. So here's a secret about us humans. We're kind of like time travelers. Most of the time we are living someplace that is not the present moment. We are planning for something. We are re-experiencing or remembering something. And both of those experiences are really beneficial. That's part of what makes us human. We have this beautiful prefrontal cortex up here on the front of our brain that lets us do things like plan and prepare and anticipate and organize and create. And that's great, but it can also get a little bit overwhelming, and we can get really overrun with our internal reactions to things that aren't actually happening in our present moment at times, especially during very stressful periods like the world we're living in right now. And I know there are many, many stressors going on at a socio-political level across the board. So I want to name that. I want to name that we're going into the week before the election, that there's a lot happening, probably not only personally, but at kind of a broader, more systemic level for folks. And certainly we can't control all of that, but what we can orient to is coming to an anchor in ourselves as part of a mindfulness practice. So that was very long-winded, but essentially I would like to introduce the idea of breath as an anchor. This is a very traditional thing to focus on in a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice. And I know it might sound a little bit like a cliche, oh, just breathe. That's going to help to breathe. That feels maybe dismissive when we say it at times. So I'm going to try to really expand on what it means to access and use breath as an anchor, and also why it's so important and what makes it really powerful. There's a reason that this is, referenced and been encouraged throughout the history of humanity. So here are my lists. You've already probably been reading them. Breath is always available to us. So it's actually always available to be attended to in the here and now. Really, think about it. This is kind of I know I had kind of a blow your mind moment when I first realized this, but never been a time in my life that I haven't been breathing. Or if I hadn't been breathing, it was probably for a very short period of time because I started breathing again. And clearly I'm here today, still breathing. So it's with us. It's been with us our entire life, and it will always be with us so long as we are alive. And it is automatic. We don't have to think about it. It just happens. Our body's really good at just making that happen for us so that we continue to have the oxygenation that we need. But it's also voluntary. So even though we don't have to think about it, we could choose to think about it. We could choose to notice and attend to it. And when we do attend to it, there's a certain amount of control that we can have over breath and breathing. We can make it a longer or shorter breath. We can change where that breath enters into our body or where it exits from our body. We can even change kind of where the capacity for breath happens. Is it more in our chest and in our back and shoulders, or is it in our lower belly? We have a certain amount of control over our breathing process, but we don't have to. It's still just happening. So both teaching striving as well as acceptance with that. It's also rhythmic yet changing. So it teaches us a little bit about constancy or stability, as well as ability to be flexible and kind of go with flow and adapt and change. So you may notice your breath is going to change a lot over the course of thoughts that you have on any given day, things that you're doing, and it needs to. It needs to be able to adapt in that way, but also stay consistent enough to keep your body alive and moving. This is the most important thing, and this is the thing why breath has been tried and true and stood the test of ages. Being mindful of breath actually allows the body and the brain to register a sense of safety. So when we are mindful of breath, when we are allowing our body to breathe naturally, slowly, deeply, in whatever capacity we can, that's actually kind of like a feedback loop that tells the rest of our system, our nervous system, and all of our physical function, hey, I'm safe. I'm safe enough to take a deep breath. I'm safe enough to take several deep breaths. And when we feel that sense of safety in our bodies, it actually allows those parts of ourselves to kind of deactivate our sympathetic nervous system, to kind of come back down, to regulate a little bit, to kind of go into a little bit of the sine wave movement where it can flex instead of feeling like all the way on all of the time. And this also turns off that part of our brain that had to go into a stress response or a fight or flight response to protect us from perceived threat or real threat. And it allows this front part of our brain that I referenced earlier, the prefrontal cortex, to sort of come back online. Fun fact, we can't even really think super rationally when we're in the midst of a fight or flight response when our nervous system is activated in that way. So when we use breath to really give ourselves those cues for safety, it lets that part of our brain that is a little bit more rational come back to be able to perceive what's happening in this present moment a little bit more clearly, to be able to recognize and become a little intuitive and insightful around what's happening, to notice our thoughts and our feelings in a new way. So breath is a really important first step to mindfulness practice. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you might use breath, and we are going to do a little bit of practice today. So there are a couple different focal points. Obviously, when you are breathing, you probably feel it at the places that you're inhaling and exhaling. So for many folks, that would be in through the nose, out through the mouth. Of course, you don't have to do that if you've got a stuffy nose or there's some other, obstacle. Breathe wherever you can breathe. The natural breath is wonderful. But you probably notice the feeling of air, if you think about it or just sense into it in this moment, going in and out of your nose or your mouth. And there are probably different feelings associated with that. You can probably get temperature from that, maybe like kind of the pressure or the flow. And you probably could even track your air and your breath, the sensation of that down into your throat, maybe toward the back of your mouth. You may feel it in your chest. You may feel it in your lower belly. You may feel it in shoulders. You may even feel it in like kind of your upper lip. There are lots of different spaces and places in our body to feel a sense of breath. And any one of those spots might be a good focal point as you start to build breath as an anchor in a mindfulness practice. So when we do our breathing, I'm gonna, be curious to see, and I hope you will all take the opportunity to just sort of do a check of like, oh, where do I feel breath the most? Is there a certain spot in my body that it's most noticeable? Okay, so when we're breathing, here are the basics. We want to, as much as possible, if we're in a space of striving for a little bit more control as opposed to natural breathing and just letting our body do its thing, if we're striving to kind of relax and give that cue to our system that we're safe, we want to do a pretty deep breath in all the way into our diaphragm, into our stomach, letting our belly expand like a balloon, and then contract fully, pulling that belly button back toward the spine when we exhale. And here's the thing, we want to actually aim, if we are practicing some of that control, for a slightly longer exhale than we do an inhale. So if we can extend that exhale, it actually allows us to take even more oxygen in when we breathe in the next time. And this pattern of kind of slow exhale is one of those cues that lets our brain and the rest of our system and body know, oh, okay, I'm safe. I'm safe enough to be able to do this long exhale. Some other ways that you may practice, just to know that you are doing kind of deep belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, would be to place a hand gently on your stomach so that you can kind of feel the pushing in or out of your stomach with your inhale and your exhale. And this actually can be really useful to practice when you're laying down on the ground, because you kind of get a gravity assist where when your belly goes up, you feel it really clearly. And then when you exhale, gravity is giving you the extra push of letting you exhale completely and getting all of that air out of your lungs. So with all of this in mind, just kind of thinking about the process of breathing, we are going to do a quick little mindful breathing meditation. I don't think this one's very long at all. So I will encourage you, whenever we do these, we have one more video that we'll be doing that's kind of a guided meditation or breathing practice. Whenever we're doing these, if you find yourself a little overwhelmed, if you find yourself, stressed, or there's something that might feel more triggering, it is perfectly okay to take a break. It is perfectly okay to say, oh, okay, I need to step out for a second if there's something that feels like just too much for whatever reason. My hope is that's not going to be the case. I've tried to pick things that hopefully don't feel particularly activating for stress responses, and intentionally kind of the opposite, hopefully more relaxing. But sometimes when we sit with our bodies and our thoughts and our feelings, we start to kind of come to things that feel a little much. So that's my disclaimer. I want you to take care of yourselves. That being said, if you do practice this mindful breathing, I hope you'll find a spot in your body that feels pretty comfortable and safe for you as an anchor point when you're noticing breath. And like I said, try to experiment a little bit if you feel like you have the wiggle room to do that, about which parts of my body or where air is coming in or exiting my body do I feel the most. And that can be a really good thing just to sort of keep your attention coming and going. All right, so as we practice this, the last thing that I will tell you is that you are going to have thoughts, because your brain is meant to make thoughts. That's what your brain does. It's totally normal. This is not about turning off your thoughts. And mindfulness is really, it's not about muting anything. What it is about is kind of helping you contain and hold whatever's happening in a present moment. So hopefully this present moment will be a good practice opportunity. And you're going to have thoughts. I'm going to have thoughts. We're all going to continue to have distracting things that come to us as we sit and we breathe. The exercise and the practice of mindfulness is coming back to that anchor. It's coming back to breath when you notice you've wandered, and not berating yourself, not being like, oh, I'm so bad at meditating, or I'm a bad person for having thoughts. Not the case at all. This is not a judgment. This is not about worth or value or right or wrong. This is just about the practice. So no more than you might judge yourself if you were lifting weights of like, oh, okay, I got really tired. I had to put that weight down for a minute. It took a couple seconds before I could pick it up and do another rep. That's kind of what mindfulness and mindful breathing can feel like at times. Is like, oh, it's a little bit of a practice. It takes a little bit of exertion to get in the hang of it and to not feel judgmental about whatever that process is like for you. All right, no further ado, let's get started. So find yourself in a comfortable position. If you have some privacy, you might want to close your eyes. If that doesn't feel comfortable, level your gaze or pick a spot that you can attend to during the practice.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your awareness to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Begin by finding a comfortable posture. Lean slightly forward and back to one side and then the other. Find a comfortable balance as you come back to the center. Now, sitting up straight, feel your head on the top of your neck. How can you sit so that your head, neck, and back feel most comfortable? Take a few deep breaths. While you are breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face and your hands and your legs. Let go of all the tension in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Where do you feel it most? In your nose or your stomach? In the rise and fall of your chest? Just notice where you feel it most and allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now, notice what the breath feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall with each inhale and exhale, and allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your awareness to the sensation of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each inhale and exhale. When your mind wanders or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the sensation of your breath in the foreground, allowing thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
All right, take your time coming back. If you had your eyes closed like I did, you might need a second just to kind of orient around your space. I might recommend kind of making eye contact with different points in your surroundings, taking in color, taking in light. maybe even doing kind of a full body twist to kind of look over your shoulder both ways, just so that you have a chance to fully kind of come back from being in a more internal present place. All right. Well, I hope that that was a good starting point for a little bit of a sample of what some mindful breathing might be like, a very short meditation that practices using breath as an anchor. And hopefully you feel a sense of awareness more about where breath is in your body and what it's like to use that as a focal point for attention. It's really, really a valuable anchor. So I hope it can be useful to everyone moving forward. So I want to talk about some other possible anchors, which honestly were already sort of baked into using breath as an anchor because we have so many, different things that relate to senses when we're breathing. But really, anything can be an anchor in your present moment. As long as you have the ability to use one of your five senses, if you have all five senses to kind of focus and attend, then it's a possible anchor. So some people really enjoy watching kind of certain images or having maybe a candle that they watch or some other kind of visual feature as an anchor for a mindfulness practice. So really allowing themselves to zoom into the experience of witnessing visually that in the present moment. Other people enjoy scents, so smells, candles, aromatherapy, or good cooking. Like there are so many different things we can smell in our surroundings that can be a very visceral and powerful way to come into a present moment. Smell can also be a tricky one because it's also very associated with memory, due in part to kind of the processing area in our brain being close to sort of memory processing as well as where smell happens. So that's kind of an interesting fun fact. But still, it can bring you into the present moment awareness of what is in your surroundings in a different way. Similarly, hearing, so perhaps listening to peaceful music, listening to sounds of nature, or just hearing the ambient noises that are happening around you, that could be another anchor point for a mindfulness practice. Touch is one of my favorites. I really actually have right next to me one of these like mermaid things, sequiny things. I really enjoy having something that's kind of tactile to hold, and that might actually be a really good practice to have something on you, especially if you're doing as many Zoom meetings as I am doing these days. That can kind of be a way to help you feel just a little more connected to the present and to have kind of a mindful anchor available to you at certain times. And then lastly, taste. And there's actually a whole process of mindful eating that I do for like kind of larger, more clinical workshops. But mindful eating is another way to really get into a present moment experience that can be awesome, especially if you have something you really enjoy eating or tasting, to really slow down and zoom into that experience. But even, just as you're going about your day, popping a mint, having, a piece of gum, anything that could kind of bring you into awareness of a visceral taste. Although, of course, it doesn't have to be a strong taste. Some water has a taste, and you can certainly have experiences related to your present moment sensations, no matter what you're tasting, drinking, doing, feeling, touching. So I would invite you all to consider your senses and maybe think about which of your senses that you have access to might be another potential anchor point in addition to breath, or even how some of these do factor into breath, how we might be smelling or hearing or feeling certain things when we are using breath as an anchor. All right, I also want to introduce the idea of grounding with your senses. This is a pretty popular one, at least in mental health circles, so you may have already been exposed to it in the past. But this is essentially another practice you can use to help kind of teach your body that you're safe and to feel a sense of security, especially if you're feeling particularly stressed, anxious, or for whatever reason, more activated. Your system is just kind of more activated and agitated at a moment. So using those senses, finding 5 things you can see, naming those things in your head or out loud. 4 things you can touch, really zooming into the texture or the feeling of touching them. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So you might kind of keep that countdown in your brain or someplace that's easily accessible if you're finding yourself in need of creating a sense of safety or calm in a present moment when your system is a little riled up. All right. So the other concept I want to introduce is we're talking about the introduction to mindfulness, getting anchors and sensations sort of in our awareness, is the idea of beginner's mind. And this applies to any sensational experience we have. Basically, the idea is imagine that you were the age of the children on the screen right now. Imagine that you're just a little thing. You're just, toddler age, or maybe no more than about 3 or 4 or 5, maybe. What is the world like for these kids? What is it like to be brand new in the world and to be looking around and experiencing and smelling and tasting and touching things for the first time? We, of course, can never go back in time. Our brains really, out of necessity, need to be able to encode and learn to become familiar and adapt and flexible with all of the data that we take in on a daily basis. And it's a good thing that that happens. It's very adaptive. However, we do have a capacity, because of this beautiful prefrontal cortex, to take this stance and to say, oh, okay, let me imagine for a second that I'm in my surroundings, or that I'm doing a task, or listening to a song, or eating a piece of food, as though it were the first time, as though I were a beginner in this experience, instead of the expert that I may have become over, many, many years of living on this planet. And when you take that beginner's mind experience, it does two things. It gives you a sense of kind of openness and gratitude for, ooh, this thing that is happening that I might appreciate in a new way or in a different way. But more importantly, it also gives you a sense of curiosity. And when we are experiencing curiosity about ourselves, about the world, about other people, we kind of by definition don't really come at that from a judgmental place. You can't truly be curious about what you're feeling, thinking, hearing, what other people are experiencing, what's going on around you, and be judgmental. Like if you're being judgmental, you're kind of by definition not actually curious about it. You're coming to a conclusion in advance. Whereas if you're entering in with some curiosity, there's a stance, there's kind of a, ooh, what could I learn? What could be new about this? And how could that be something that I integrate, or that I benefit from, or that I'm able to understand in new ways? So this is another really lovely concept. It may be a good one to use during a practice. If you're, using one of those anchors, you may take on a beginner's mind stance and just kind of zoom into that for a minute and ask yourself, what would it be like to be experiencing my life right now as if I were just a beginner? Okay, so I think that will conclude one kind of initial part of our section for this workshop series. We're going to kind of go a little bit up the ladder now. We're going a little bit more advanced. And we're going to talk about what happens as we start to get more comfortable with a regular mindfulness practice, or at least just having moments of awareness where we're more mindful. You start to notice as you do this over time that we kind of have two modes, and obviously they are associated with mindfulness. So the first mode I will call autopilot, or doing mode. And that's when we're doing that time traveling thing. That's when we're in the past, when we're in the future, when we're, active planning. And that's really important. As I said, like it's an essential part of being human. We have to do that. Of course, when we're doing that, we kind of have partial awareness. We're not really in the present moment, or we are, but only to a certain degree. And when we're in autopilot or doing mode, where we're just chugging along, doing our thing, we often tend to feel more disconnected from whatever's happening internally with us, because this part of our brain is just kind of taking us out into the world and doing time travel. So this is a part of our, mental experience, emotional experience, where we can have thoughts or feelings that are just sort of rambling or undistracted, kind of in a distracted mode. I like to think about this as being on cruise control. This is really important. Like, it's nice to have cruise control if your car has it. If you're on a long stretch of highway, you are on your way someplace, there's not a lot to see, you need to keep the same speed, you can put yourself on autopilot pretty safely and, continue to drive safely, but have a conversation with the person in the car, or listen to a podcast or a song. So autopilot's good, it's not a bad thing. But sometimes we hit a point in the road, which is illustrated by the lower image, where it's gorgeous, or where there's really tricky stuff happening on the road. We're going through a mountain, or there's obstacles, there's something happening. And it would behoove us in those moments to be fully plugged in, to, instead of being doing mode or an autopilot, to be zoomed in and mindful to what's happening around us or within us, and to be in that moment rather than do that moment. So when we're in mindfulness, when we're in being mode as opposed to doing mode, we're not outside of the present moment, we're within it. And we don't really have to do a lot of monitoring or planning, because we're just experiencing whatever is happening as it unfolds. So again, the themes here would be non-judgment, not feeling a certain amount of needing to change or pressure to do anything differently, just acceptance of being in the moment. And it's a way of being embodied. So it's a way of coming out of our head space and getting more into our entire physical space, which will include a little bit of headspace, because that's always with us. but it kind of drops us out of just being, in this section of our experience all of the time. We get to feel our feelings, we get to feel our sensations, we get to think our thoughts and notice how those connect. So it actually allows us to kind of start putting some puzzle pieces together over time. So the idea of being mode, we're going to practice that with our second meditation. It's a little longer, this one, but I think we can get through it. This is a body scan. So especially if you are somebody who might have certain parts of your body that feel a little less comfortable to sit with or attend to. Again, I've tried to intentionally select one that is not, it's not in depth, it's not super long, it's a pretty generic one. So hopefully it won't be too specific. But if there are certain parts of your body that you might feel a little uncomfortable with, or that might just bring up certain emotions or feelings as you go through a body scan, which literally is what it sounds like. It's starting at your head or your toes and kind of working your way systematically through feeling your body. Then I invite you to either skip this if you want to take a break for the next 5 to 10 minutes, or if you think you want to give it a shot, you still have full permission to open your eyes or keep your eyes open the whole time if you choose to, or find one of those anchor points, whether it's visually or auditorily or any other sensation, if you ever need to kind of take a break and come to a different anchor that might be a little more tolerable in the moment. So we'll get started with this, very similar to the last one. Find yourself in a comfortable position, and you can make choices about how you want to be set up and whether you want your eyes closed or open or focused in a certain way.
Body scan. The purpose of body scan is to simply check in to see what's going on in your body with open curiosity. There's no need to judge or try to change anything. We're just bringing attention to each part of our body in sequence, noticing how each part is connected to the next. Start by bringing your attention to the general position of your body. Are you sitting up straight with your feet flat on the ground and your hands on your knees? Or maybe you're lying on your back with arms resting by your sides. Notice the relationship of your body to the space around you. Notice where you are, the time of day. Notice if you have any tension or tightness in your body. Notice what you're thinking and feeling. Are you restless or grounded? Agitated or calm? Just notice what's going on without judging or trying to change anything. Now bring your attention to your breathing. Become aware of where you feel your breath most. It might be in your nose or in your chest or stomach. Breathe in deeply and notice the breath as it fills your body. Breathe out and notice the breath as it goes out. Simply be aware of the sensations in your body, allowing them space to just be. Now, bring your attention to the top of your head, then to the back and sides of your head, and down to your ears. Bring your attention to your face, your forehead and eyebrows, your eyes, cheeks, mouth, and jaw. Whatever is experienced, just allow it and let it be. Now, move your attention down into your neck and shoulders. just noticing how your neck and shoulders feel with a sense of curiosity. Move your attention into your arms, your elbows, down through your forearms, and into your wrists and hands, fingers and thumbs. Just notice the sensations you feel. It's as if you were traveling through your body with your mind, just seeing what's there. Now move your attention to your torso and your chest and upper back. Notice your heartbeat and the sensation of breathing. Now move your attention into your stomach and lower back. Your stomach is the home of digestion, and for many of us, a place where we hold many emotions. So just spending a few moments paying attention to this area, feeling what's here, and just letting it be. We don't need to do anything. We are just noticing the sensations in our stomach and lower back and letting them be. And now, move your attention to your hips, down into your legs, your thighs, knees, shins, and calves, and into your ankles, to the tops of your feet, the sides of your feet, and to the bottom of the feet. And finally, feel how each part of your body is connected. Feel your foot connected to your ankle connected to your knees and legs, your legs connected to your hips, to your stomach and lower back, connected to your torso, chest, upper back, shoulders, and arms. Your arms connected to your shoulders and your neck connected to your head. Feel the skin around your whole body. Notice the sensations on your skin, the temperature and texture. Become aware of your whole body in this moment. You don't need to think about what's right or wrong. Just relax in a sense of physical wholeness. Feel how your whole body is connected. And now let your attention rest on your breath. Breathing in and breathing out, feeling your body expand and contract with each inhale and exhale. And when you're ready, bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
just like last time, take a couple seconds, get yourself sort of eased back into your body, maybe doing a little bit of stretching for this one since it was a little longer and we were feeling into our body a lot. You might even repeat kind of the process of turning your shoulders and looking around, just bringing yourself back if your eyes were closed. So the body scan, I hope, is a nice progression on top of using breath as an anchor and really allowing yourself to start to experience the sense of embodiment. Of course, that would be the being mode that we discussed right before we started. And it can be really useful for relaxation, but also just for coming home to yourself when you're feeling in that headspace for too long. So I hope that can be a good one, a good tool. There are lots of variations on that. So you probably noticed thoughts and emotions as you were practicing the body scan, because of course that's what brains do. And the next step in the mindfulness workshop that we'll do today is kind of beginning a little bit more awareness and building a sense of understanding about how present moment awareness can lead to insight and making connections around patterns or experiences. So I'm going to ask you to rest your gaze or close your eyes again. I know you just had them closed for a little while, so apologies if it's disorienting. Like I said, you can rest your gaze if you prefer not to close. And we're going to do just a quick visualization, the point of which is to kind of get you connected to things that might come up for you in terms of your thoughts, your physical sensations, or emotions. So we're going to imagine that you are in a setting that's a familiar place. It could be outdoors if you have a spot outdoors that you're walking regularly. It could be indoors if you can imagine sort of a long windowed hallway or some other setting similar to that. So imagining yourself in that space, walking or moving along down the path. And you might even start to really zoom into some of the details of what would be around you, imagining what the landscape is around you or outside the windows, maybe picturing the colors of the leaves on the trees. If it's outdoors, you may have temperature, you may have weather or light. Just envisioning it as clearly as you can, that you're just going along down this familiar place. And as you walk along, you realize that up ahead of you, maybe 10 feet ahead, you are coming across the path of somebody that you know in your life. Could be somebody that you know pretty well or somebody that you just know well enough that you enjoy spending some time with, but regardless, someone familiar and who knows you as well. And as you come up, you're walking along your path and you're coming up close to them. You begin to prepare to smile or to wave or to say hello as you approach them. And they just walk right by you. They don't acknowledge you. They just kind of keep moving. And you're continuing along that path on your own. So after you visualize that, if you had your eyes closed, you can kind of start to reopen or come back. If you had your gaze diffused, you can kind of come back. I'm curious what you might have noticed, and you may kind of even take account for yourself. Were there certain things that kind of came up for you? Did you have a thought? Did you have a sensation in your body? Was there a specific feeling or emotion that you could name? And my guess is if you're anything like me, the first time that I did this, I felt sad. I felt sort of disappointed. There's a dropping feeling in my stomach of, oh, this person that I know and I'm familiar with is just not acknowledging me. I think I probably had a thought of, what did I do? Did I upset them? Did I, make them angry? And I realize as we do this visualization every time that there's so many different ways to interpret it. You may not have had any of those, feelings or interpretations. You may have been maybe more pissed, kind of angry, like, why would that person stub me like that? Or maybe you felt your sensations in your body in a different way. Maybe you felt kind of a heat or tension in your chest, or you had, some other noticeable sensation in your head or your back or your neck. There are lots of different ways that we can interpret the same situation, is the illustration of this little exercise. And our interpretation of the same data, of the same events, actually obviously plays a pretty large part in how we determine our mood or how we're feeling on any given basis. So here I have kind of a slide that talks about this, that the situation plus the interpretation can result in different feelings and different ways that we experience life and the data that we collect with our brain and our being. And because there are many interpretations of one event, you could have in this visualization maybe felt kind of concerned for the person that you know well as you cross paths with them. Perhaps you thought, oh, that person must be really going through something, or they're really preoccupied. They didn't even notice me. And you might feel kind of worried for them, or maybe even kind of like, oh, I should follow up with that person and check in with them. Or if you were feeling kind of the way that I felt the first time that I did this visualization, you might kind of feel like, oh, that person was rejecting me or treating me rudely. And in that case, you might feel more hurt. You might feel more angry. None of these feelings are wrong, and none of these interpretations are technically wrong. We don't really know what happened because it's not a real event. It's one that our brain just, populated for us through this experience. And that is another wonderful illustration of how our feelings and our experiences can be really easily populated by just envisioning things, by just taking things that might feel true inside of our headspace. And our body will react to that, even though it's not necessarily a capital T truth or something that has happened in reality. And as we think about interpretation, I do want you to think about if you're feeling more stressed, if you're feeling more overwhelmed or anxious, you're probably, if you're anything like me, more likely to interpret things from kind of a more negative stance that feels more distressing, that feels like, oh, it kind of adds to the existing pain or suffering, rather than a stance that might sort of acknowledge pain but not add additional suffering. And so here's where mindfulness comes in. You're probably like, okay, well, that's all maybe common knowledge or makes sense, but how do we work with that, and how can mindfulness play a role? Well, that's why I have this lovely little image, and why I also have this lovely little quote from Viktor Frankl. So between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. And in this space lies our power and our freedom. It's a very powerful quote. I'm not using it in its most powerful way here, but I think it's illustrating something, that when we are present with ourselves, when we're practicing mindfulness, or we have the capacity to use mindfulness in any given moment, we can try to find that space. We can recognize, ooh, there was an input, there was data that I got through my brain or through my experience, and then a feeling or a thought or an experience happened within me. And between that thing and the outcome, there was probably some room for interpretation. And even though we can't, fully change reactions in the moment, what we can do is start to recognize where those things are coming from, how they come up, what is most likely to come up. And as we learn those things about ourselves, we do have a little bit more flexibility in that gap space to say, ooh, I can feel my heart rate rising. Okay. Ooh, I'm probably starting to feel a little bit of that anger. I'm feeling maybe rejected or dismissed. And to attend to that is, that's a possibility. I'm allowed to feel that. I could be feeling that, and that may be real for me in this moment. And I may not, this is just data. I may not have the full story. And do I need to feel anger right now? Is anger going to be the feeling that serves me? Do I have any choice? I may not have any choice in it. I may just have to use my mindfulness skills to kind of hold that that's the feeling I'm having. And yet, over time, in that gap, you may have a little flexibility to occasionally steer your surfboard in one direction or another, and to ride a wave in a way that allows you to feel hopefully a little less suffering. So in this scenario, I know I felt bad. It felt really awful to think that this person that I loved didn't want to stop and say hello to me. And it's not a real scenario, so it's, that's a moot point. But if that was going to create additional pain or suffering, I may make the choice to interpret or to think about, there's this other way of viewing things where I could be concerned for that person, or there may be something completely beyond my control. And then that allows my emotional response and my mental response to kind of adapt and change over time. Okay, so I know we're probably running close on time, we always are. I do want to introduce a couple of new concepts that are kind of the advanced level stuff, the future stuff that you could bridge into if you really are enjoying mindfulness practice, and kind of, I think, what the real end goal of mindfulness practice would be for just sort of human well-being. So there is a specific practice called RAIN, it's an acronym, that is a self-compassion meditation. That is a way of being present with yourself in the moment, in the ways that we've discussed in kind of a more elementary way, that is intentionally meant to kind of instruct inward feelings of compassion, feelings of well-being and acceptance, and to approach yourself gently as we remove layers of self-judgment, or we remove difficult moments of suffering. So when we're in a moment of suffering, if we're going through something painful, if we just did that visualization and we're still really feeling that anger, and it's hurting us and we're feeling that pain, RAIN is a really lovely way to then approach that from a mindfulness perspective. It helps us to detach from those unhelpful interpretations about ourselves, especially, but eventually even over time for others. And so the practice here, you can see in the little graphic, stands for R, recognize what's going on. Just, oh, okay, I'm in a moment of suffering. I'm recognizing that I'm feeling a way. I'm feeling a way that might be kind of hard on me, that might hurt me more than help me. A would be then to allow the experience, as we've been practicing with the other sort of exercises, to allow the experience to be there as it is, to take a moment to really hold and contain and just notice it, to let it be, to not judge it, to not try to will it away, but just to let it exist and to feel that in our body as well as to think about it and notice it in our mind. And then as we start to sit with the allowing, we start to investigate with kindness. We might start to peel back the layers of what we're thinking or feeling in that moment and do this with that curiosity that we might get from practices with beginner's mind even. What's going on? Why am I feeling this way? What's this related to? Why does this make sense? What could this be connected to in my life? And to do it not in like an accusatory way, but in the way that you would be saying to a child, to a loved one, somebody that you care about. And as you start to investigate and uncover whatever's going on in that moment for you, then you're moving into kind of a natural awareness where you're not seeing that experience as defining who you are. You're just seeing it as something that you are going through in this moment. And actually, it's not on this graphic, but the real end would be then to nurture, to kind of turn inward and to offer yourself compassion and nurturing around whatever that pain is about. And here are some things that might be nurturing that you could say to yourself in this practice. My current experience is not a reflection of my being or worth. The fact that I feel hurt, rejected, angry, any of these pieces, that's real, and that's not all I am. That's not who I am at my core. It's not a defining factor. It's just a thing that I am going through as a human. My right to wellness is not conditional, might be another phrase that would be nurturing and part of that end step. Or I deserve compassion when I'm suffering. Or asking yourself, what can I offer myself that will help me to grow or help me to feel soothed in the moment? So I know this is a little vague. If you're curious about RAIN, there's a lot of resources online. And of course, I'd be happy via email to kind of send some of those your way if that would be helpful. But compassion and gratitude really are the pinnacle of a mindfulness experience and kind of what we're aiming for over time. They're ways of engaging yourself gently and fully that help you to tolerate suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering hopefully can be optional at times. And it cultivates a sense of unconditional acceptance and appreciation for yourself, as well as then translating that to others. So basically the idea of embodying compassion and gratitude with present moment awareness is moving into a sense of wholeness and acceptance at a deeper, more emotional level. And that of course helps us to tolerate day-to-day stressors, day-to-day anxieties, as well as extreme stressors and anxieties. So the last practices I might leave you with here are to, in the next, several minutes after you wrap up, to think about one person that you feel compassionately toward in your life and what you would want to say to them if they came to you in a moment of suffering. And whatever those words are, however you would phrase that to someone you love, I hope you will take that language and turn it inward and speak to yourself that way when you notice you're in a suffering moment. And similarly, I hope you'll also think about something in your life you feel a sense of gratitude for, big or small. It doesn't have to be profound. Whatever that is, whether it's a pet, whether it's just having a beautiful view on a nice day, whatever that might be, big or small, just acknowledging how that makes your life feel fuller and meaningful in any given way. All right, we did a lot in an hour. We did these practices, or at least discussed some of them. And we talked about all of these different concepts. So thank you so much for hanging in with me through everything. Like I said, happy to follow up via email if anybody has questions or wants to kind of go a little deeper into one of these concepts or practices. And I hope that you will reflect a little bit on what you're taking with you from the workshop, if you learned anything about yourself, and if there are any of these practices or maybe other practices you want to look into that you might try to explore in your life. And we moved through, all 5 of these steps pretty quickly. So I hope that you did get something out of each of those steps along the way. All right, so I think we're at the Q&A section. I'm